So it's 6:30 Sunday morning, and I've been up all night rewatching the Week 10 games. And first and foremost, it's impossible to believe we're already at Week 10. That's really tough to believe. But what's tougher is, depending on which fan base you were, is watching what happened during the course of Week 10, because we have got to talk about several games, including Alabama having a shocking upset loss to LSU, Baylor taking it to the Oklahoma Sooners, and Georgia blowing the doors off the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, this is going to be a little bit different style of video, guys, so I'm interested to see if you enjoy it. If you enjoy this, hop down to the comments, let me know. We're going to be doing a rapid reaction where I quickly go through all three of these games. After this longer style video is posted, I'll chop it down and give each team's video out respectively. But super interested in seeing if you guys are interested in this style of content. Let me know if you are. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Pushing towards 15,000. I'd love to have you a part of this awesome community. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. We have got a lot to talk about, and we're going to start with the Alabama game because I have got a lot I want to say, especially after rewatching that game. This Alabama team is a little bit of an enigma to me, and the reason is quite simple, because the talent on this team makes your head spin. Whenever you look at the quarterback position with Bryce Young, whenever you look at the edge rushers with Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, whenever you look at the running back room with Jace McClellan, Jahmyr Gibbs, there is so much talent on this team. But the discipline, this is really a unique situation for Alabama. Typically, we think of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and you can expect a few things. They're going to be talented, absolutely, but they are going to be one of college football's most disciplined teams. They are going to be one of college football's most intense teams. Right now, out of the three things I said you can always expect Alabama to be, in talented, disciplined, and intense, when I look at this Alabama team, I've only seen them be one of those things consistently, and that's talented. Because if we're talking about disciplined, well, Alabama ranked 131 out of 131 eligible teams in terms of penalties per game, so they are not a disciplined team whatsoever. You look at the Tennessee game, where Alabama played with fire, 17 penalties. You look at the Texas game, where they played with fire, 15 penalties. You look at several games throughout this year where the Crimson Tide have continually played with fire, and this is the second time they got burned this year. The first time was by Tennessee. So it doesn't matter if you're losing these games by a point or 3 points. The same thing is happening week in and week out, and the Crimson Tide are expecting different results. Guys, there's a famous saying about that exact same line of logic. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. You play with fire that often, you're going to get burned. And you know, it takes me back to another saying we all heard growing up. If someone shows you who they are, believe them. Now, I've been defending this Crimson Tide team for quite some time, and even this week I have got to eat crow because I picked Alabama to beat LSU, and I didn't think it was a favorable matchup for the Tigers. I thought Alabama would be able to come out of this game with a really nice statement win, and we'd be having a totally different conversation. But I was 100% wrong, and that's on me to eat the crow. But at the same time, one of the areas where I'm kicking myself is I think back to that phrase I just gave you. If someone shows you who they are, believe them. And the Crimson Tide have showed us time and time again this year. That is exactly who they are. They're an incredibly talented team. They are very talented. There is no questioning the caliber of athlete they're fielding, but the discipline, it's head spinning. It makes no sense. The intensity, it's just not there on a consistent basis. And I'm not questioning anybody's heart. These dudes work so hard on a day in, day out basis. I'm not questioning their heart. I'm saying when you flip on the tape come Saturday, if I was able to make it to where you couldn't tell which team was which, if I showed you Georgia's defense playing football and I showed you Alabama's defense playing football, unanimously everyone would say, well, that Georgia defense, that's the intense one. I don't think there's really a question about it. That's not to say that the Bama team doesn't have heart. I, of course, believe they have heart. That doesn't mean they're not talented. Of course they're talented. But we've seen the same thing over and over again, and the Crimson Tide continue to expect different results. And why, I'm not sure. And this gets me into the last thing we need to talk about for the Crimson Tide before we move on to the other teams. And that's the coaching decisions we saw during the course of this game. And not only during the course of this game, but throughout the course of the year. And I'm not simply talking offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. No, I think there's going to be a long, hard look at even position coaches, and we're going to see who's still on the staff come next year. Because there's a lot that's happened that I just don't think makes much sense. We'll start with the offense. Because from the offensive side of the ball, first and foremost, the play calling makes almost no sense. Alabama's play calling is not cohesive. And what I mean when I say that, they don't stack plays on top of each other well. It almost looks like I took an offensive coordinator, took his play calling sheet, blew it up, and taped it onto a wall. The same time, I took that same offensive coordinator, put a blindfold on him, spun him around a bunch, and then handed him a dart and said, hey, whatever you hit on that dartboard, that's what we're running. It doesn't matter what happened the time before. Doesn't matter what you're going to do next time. Heck, it doesn't even matter what the defense is lined up in. That's the play we're going to run. That's what it looks like. It is just a random amalgamation of play calling, and it looks like it. And even outside of Bill O'Brien, I think we can ask questions about several different position groups for the Crimson Tide offensively. The offensive line has continued to get better. I think that Coach Wolford only being there a year, he probably earns the benefit of the doubt because we have seen an offensive line continue to improve. And remember, I said in the offseason coming into this year, you're not going to convince me that an offensive line that's struggling, that loses Evan Neal, is going to miraculously be a better offensive line. I don't see how that's possible, and here we are. But there are several position groups for the Crimson Tide offensively that those position coaches, they're going to have a long, hard conversation with Nick Saban at the end of this year, and who knows what will happen. Defensively, this is where it gets head-scratching, because Pete Golding has been an up-and-down journey for Alabama fans. Finally, when everything looked like all the questions on Pete Golding were beginning to chill, here we go watching this game. And guys, I'm not saying you have to have a supreme understanding of football. You don't. But you know something's off when my fiance, who is a college football fan but doesn't watch it as intensely as I do, or a lot of my friends do, looked at me during the fourth quarter of that game perplexed at 2 play calls. And I'm going to walk you through them. Because in the fourth quarter of this game, when everything's on the line, there's nothing new happening. You know exactly who Jaden Daniels at this point. You've seen him for 3 quarters. You've seen all the film before the game, and now you've played him for 3 quarters. You know he's a mobile guy. You know what he's done with his legs this year. In fact, he's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the nation running the football. And on 4th down, you load the line of scrimmage with nobody protecting the middle. First off, that doesn't make sense for a few different reasons. You have a mobile quarterback, there's no quarterback spy, and you leave a large percentage of the field open. Oh, by the way, Alabama plays man coverage, meaning your defensive backs are going to be locked up with LSU wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs, and their back is going to be to the quarterback. So the only people that can make a play is the front 7, and you eliminated those linebackers from contention to be able to make a play, giving Jaden Daniels nothing but space and opportunity. That right there was perplexing. It didn't make much sense, but you know what? Sometimes an offense just calls a play that works perfectly against the defensive play call you called. So I can disagree with the play, but fair enough. But what was just nonsensical is a few plays later, on another key down, Alabama lines up in the exact same formation. Nobody over the middle. And where does LSU go? Right to the middle. This is what I mean. Alabama has done the same thing over and over and over and over again and expected different results. And at a certain point, that's insanity. And for LSU and Brian Kelly, look, first and foremost, hats off. In Brian Kelly's first year with the LSU Tigers, he gets a big win against the Alabama Crimson Tide at home, which I know is going to do a lot for that fan base and their excitement towards the future of that program. But also Brian Kelly, when he came to the SEC, leaving Notre Dame for LSU, talked about how he wanted to go up against the best. He wanted to go to the SEC so he could compete and try and beat Nick Saban because he wanted to face the best. And look, in year 1, you were able to beat Nick Saban, so can't wait to see what the future holds for those battles. I think they're going to be really interesting to watch. But if we're talking about what LSU showed on the field, they showed the same thing I think they've showed time and time again this year, that they're going to fight. No matter how it looks, they're going to fight. And Jaden Daniels, what a journey he's had. I talked about him a lot in the offseason. He was one of the players I was most excited to watch this year coming out of the transfer portal, and the reason is very simple. Guys, if you go back and watch his freshman year, he was captivating. He moved the needle for college football. He was so talented, and the future looked so high, but he was in an environment that now we know was utter chaos at Arizona State. It's very difficult for anybody to flourish in chaos. And now he moves environments, and we can start to see he's getting comfortable. He's having fun in his new environment, And I just think it's very cool how he's responded to LSU, how the coaches have responded to him, and how the players have seemingly responded to him. Because at the end of the day, he got a big win yesterday, and good for him. And I know that means a lot because of the journey he's been on. But for LSU as a whole, super interested to see how they finish out recruiting. They got a big recruiting win right after the big win on the field, so you gotta love that if you're an LSU fan, doubling down on the win. But I'm super interested to see how LSU finishes the year and what the Brian Kelly tenure is going to hold for the Tigers. This was a big game for the Crimson Tide. They had to win this to be in hopes of going to the college football playoffs, and now those hopes are gone. And I need to be very forthright in this. If that Alabama team had somehow beat LSU, had somehow beat Ole Miss, and then beat Auburn, and played like that against Georgia, I think Georgia would have run them out the building, and I don't think it would have been pretty. I can't wait to hear what y'all are thinking on that. We have other games we need to talk about. I could go on for days about this game, but Bama is going to be fine. But they have got some things to figure out before next year, because next year they don't have Will Anderson. Next year you have to imagine they're not going to have Bryce Young. They're not going to have some of those safeties. They're not going to have some of the veteran pieces they were going to rely on this year. So they've got some things they have got to figure out, and we're going to have some more conversations about that.